What's going on, guys? It's the Draft Nerd, and day 2 of the NFL Draft has wrapped up, so I'm here to give you a few of my winners and some of my losers as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, coming in at number 1, my first winner, I do have the Eagles, and unfortunately, as a Giants fan, it's year after year after year, the Eagles just have good draft class after good draft class after good draft class. It seems like ever since Howie Roseman missed on the Jalen Reagor draft pick like 4 or 5 years ago, he's like vowed to never ever miss on a draft pick ever again. So in day 2 of the draft, they took Cooper DeJean, which I know this is a day 2 draft video, but they got Quinion Mitchell in the first round. How did they get Cooper DeJean in the second round? That's my 2 top corners right there. How did they get both of them? I mean, Cooper DeJean is going to fit perfectly with the Eagles. And now that they got Quinion Mitchell, they have Darius Slay, James Bradberry, they got outside corners. Although I think Cooper DeJean can play on the outside, he's not going to have to be asked to year 1 or year 2 probably. He's going to be able to play in the slot, play as a box safety, he can play as a free, he's going to be the Swiss Army knife of this defense. Similar to a guy like Kyle Hamilton for the Ravens or Brian Branch. He's just going to be that Swiss Army knife that offenses aren't going to know what to do with. So, I mean, that's an A+ pick in my opinion. Don't know how he fell to the second round, but Howie Roseman, man. And then Jalix Hunt, the edge rusher. I mean, I'm never the biggest fan of Jalix Hunt. Thought he was pretty unpolished. Has a lot of work to be done, but the Howie Roseman knows things that I guess other people don't. So he sees something in Jalix Hunt. So I'm not gonna judge that pick too much. I think it's a bit of an average pick in my opinion, but the Eagles are going to find a way to make him productive. I just know it. Alright, my second winner of day 2 was the Chargers. They drafted Ladd McConkey in the second round, and then they drafted Junior Colson in the third. So, the criticism of the Joe Alt pick in day 1 of the first round was, a bit unfair in my opinion. I know they got to get Justin Herbert some weapons, but they got him protection in Joe Alt. They got their two bookend tackles for years to come. And then they get Ladd McConkey, an extremely smooth separator. He's going to be Justin Herbert's best friend. And then they got Joshua Palmer on the outside as well as Quentin Johnston on the other side. So they got their outside guys, but they got that really, really good separating slot wide receiver that Justin Herbert is going to just feed the ball to. I really like that pick a lot. I think Ladd McConkey could have won in the first round. I think I like Ladd McConkey a little bit more than Ricky Pearsall, who went first round to the 49ers, and they're, similar players. And then they got Junior Colson in the third round. I mean, we all knew Jim Harbaugh was going to get at least one Michigan player in this draft, and it ended up being Junior Colson, the linebacker out of Michigan. And, he's more of that throwback linebacker, a little bit of a bigger, stockier guy, but he can, he can lay the wood on you. I think he's decent at pass coverage, nothing special, but I think he's just going to be a really solid linebacker for him. Jim Harbaugh is obviously going to get a few more Michigan guys probably in day 3, but I mean, I like this draft overall. You got Justin Herbert, a weapon, and Ladd McConkey, and then you get your Michigan guy, Junior Colson. I like that a lot. And then moving on to arguably the best, day 2 pick in general, we got the Colts taking Adonai Mitchell. Now, I know, why A.D. Mitchell fell this far. I assume it was because he's diabetic, and apparently in the mornings, with his blood sugar high and stuff like that, he gets quote unquote uncoachable. He gets, mood swings, this, that. I mean, dude, come on. He's a kid. I don't know. I don't think that's a reason for him to fall this far. I mean, the talent is out of this world with A.D. Mitchell. And the amount of receivers that went over him, who went over him? Keon Coleman, I don't think should have went over him. Ladd McConkey, although I really like him, don't think should have went over him. Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Worthy in the first round. There's tons of guys I think A.D. Mitchell is better than. And so getting him, late in the second round is an A+ pick for the Colts. And then Matt Goncalves, or however you pronounce his last name, I think it's Goncalves. He's a solid tackle, maybe projects the guard a little bit better. Just a developmental guy who you can just, get in that offensive line room and develop. So, I mean, I really like this day 2 as well, mainly because of A.D. Mitchell. And then moving on, we got the Commanders, who had a lot of day 2 picks. So we're going to just list them off real quick. We got Jerzon Newton, Mike Sainristil, Ben Sinnott, Brandon Coleman, and Luke McCaffrey, brother of Christian McCaffrey. So starting off, again, similar with the Colts. Don't know how Jerzon Newton fell to the second round. And the fact that, and we'll get to it in a little bit, but the fact that the Falcons traded up in the second round ahead of the Commanders to take Rook Aurora Rojo instead of Jerzon Newton, beats me. But we'll get to that in a second. Jerzon Newton just falling into the Commanders' laps, again, as a Giants fan, makes me a little bit mad. Jerzon Newton, yes, he's a little undersized, but if a guy like Kalijah Kancey last year can go in the first round, I think Jerzon Newton can as well. He's an undersized, penetrating 3-tech, maybe lacks the leverage in the, run defense game, but, I mean, the talent and the tape alone should have made him a first-round pick. Don't know how I felt at the second round. And then you got Mike Sainristil, probably the best slot corner in the draft. He's not going to be big enough to play on the outside, but he's just a feisty slot corner who's going to be, really good in run defense and can cover in the slot. Really good pick in my opinion. And then you got Ben Sinnott, who is, most people's tight end too, since, Jatavion Sanders didn't have the best, combine workout and, athletic performances. So I really like Ben Sinnott. Maybe not my tight end too, but still a really solid pick. Brandon Coleman, the TCU tackle, maybe projects more to guard, but again, getting a talented offensive lineman in the O-line room is always a good idea, somewhere in day 2. And then Luke McCaffrey, the receiver, Christian McCaffrey's brother, maybe a bit of a reach in my opinion. I believe he was the 100th overall pick. I don't really necessarily think he's a top 100 player. Guys like, Troy Franklin, I think should have won over him. Javon Baker, guys like Malik Washington, there's a few receivers I would have took over Luke McCaffrey, but I still think he's a good player. Maybe just a slight reach in my opinion. But you can't discount the Jerzon Newton pick, Mike Sainristil, and Brandon Coleman, Ben Sinnott. Really good picks for the Commanders. I like that draft a lot. And then moving on to my last winner. Again, we're only going to do a few winners and a few losers. I'm not going to go over every pick of day 2 because at the end of the entire draft, I'll be ranking every team's draft classes. My last winner of this video is going to be the Steelers. Picking up Zach Frazier, just a really mean, nasty interior offensive lineman. He can play center, guard, just a really tough Steelers type of pick. And then you got Roman Wilson, who, if you know about Steelers day 2 wide receivers, they're always good. And so I don't think that's going to change with Roman Wilson. And then they also got Peyton Wilson, the athletic freak at linebacker with injury concerns. So, starting off with Zach Frazier, they get Troy Fautanu in the first round, presumably going to play tackle his first year, alongside Broderick Jones. I mean, I guess it's going to be Troy Fautanu at left tackle, Broderick Jones at right tackle. And then you got Zach Frazier, who's going to play somewhere in that interior of the offensive line, maybe center, maybe guard. The Steelers did a very, very good job at rebuilding this offensive line. And then you got Roman Wilson, who, you trade away Deontay Johnson, a really smooth separator, and then you draft a really smooth separator in Roman Wilson. I think he's going to fit right into the Steelers offense alongside guys like George Pickens. So another really good pick in my opinion. And then Peyton Wilson, the only reason he fell this much was because of his injury concerns. And so if the Steelers feel good about his injury history, and if Peyton Wilson can stay healthy his NFL career, he's going to be one of the top linebackers in the NFL in a few years, in my opinion. He's got all the athletic traits you want. He's got sideline to sideline speed. He's instinctual, in pass coverage, he's viable. Not necessarily his strong suit, but, the athletic traits are there. Best linebacker in the country, the past 2 years, as long as you don't count the injuries. So this is probably my favorite day 2 draft class of the video, just because I think they got 3 really solid players. The other teams only had, either 2 solid players, maybe 3, but their entire day 2 was just solid picks for the Steelers. And then moving on to our first of 2 losers in this video, I got the Carolina Panthers, and there had to be some losers. I don't think they had a terrible day 2. They get Jonathan Brooks. The one thing I will say is they did snipe Jonathan Brooks from, Jerry Jones and the Cowboys. So, that was a win in my book. I really didn't want to see Jonathan Brooks go to Dallas. But I just think it was a little bit early for a running back here. Jonathan Brooks wasn't even my running back 1. He was my RB2. I really like Trey Benson a lot more, and he, went in round 3. So there was a big gap between the first running back off the board and the second, which tells you maybe a bit of a reach. And the thing with Jonathan Brooks, I think before his ACL injury, he had a really good shot at being the best running back in this class. Running backs coming off an ACL injury, you don't really know what you're going to get. When Saquon Barkley went down with the ACL tear, he didn't come back the same player for a full year after he came back from it. That could be the same with Jonathan Brooks. players aren't able to really trust their knee. It's a lot of mental games they go through, not being able to trust the knee and stuff like that. I don't think his burst is going to be quite the same as soon as he comes back. I think it'll come back eventually, but, year one, he might not be the most productive back in the class just because he's coming back from the ACL injury. And then Trevin Wallace, I think, was a sizable reach. He's probably my linebacker, 8 or 9, and, he went like linebacker, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3, 4 maybe. So, not the biggest fan of Trevin Wallace. I think that was a reach as well. They got 2 solid players, but for where they were drafted at, I think they were both pretty sizable reaches, and that's why they're a loser. And then moving on to the last loser of the video. I'm sorry, Falcons fans, but you're not off to a great start in this draft. You took Michael Penix in round 1, which I understand. I understand what you were trying to do. I think you picked the wrong quarterback. If you're going to go quarterback, I think you should have went J.J. McCarthy. And then in day 2, you trade up ahead of the Commanders. In my opinion, when it happened, I was like, oh, they're getting Jer'Zhan Newton. They're turning this draft around. And then they go ahead and draft Ruke Rojo. And, I'm a big Rook fan, I think he's really talented. But when you had a chance to get Jer'Zhan Newton, Jer'Zhan Newton was my defensive tackle 1 ahead of Byron Murphy, who went in the first round. So, passing up on a really talented defensive tackle to get maybe a more developmental defensive tackle on Rook, I'm not a big fan of that. But, I like the player. I just think you could have got a better player. And then Braylon Trace, I don't got many things to say about Braylon Trace. I think that was a pretty good pick. Braylon Trace, maybe not the most athletic edge rusher, doesn't have quite the elite bend that some of these other guys do, but he knows how to get after the quarterback. He creates a lot of pressures, or at least he did at Washington. Didn't necessarily always finish the job, but he got pressure on the quarterback, which is really valuable in today's NFL. So, athletic limitations might hinder him a little bit in the NFL, but I think he's got really good power and really good technique, which could help him a lot in the NFL. So I'm not really going to crap on the Braylon Trace pick too much, because Braylon Trace was a really big my guy. Maybe a little bit early, but I like the pick. But the Ruke Rojo pick is, a very questionable pick in my opinion. But yeah, that's going to do it. Let me know what you guys think. If you have any more winners or losers, let me know down in the comments. And as always, I'm the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.